to run for 10 seconds at least to see it.
Yes, okay.
We can be working away at it much.
Okay, I'll be working away at it. 7 fine tongues it is too.
Oh, it is.
That's the recorded sound as well, is it?
It is, yeah.
7 fine tongues.
You're going to have another go on over at the fire with the tongs.
Yes, because I have an assortment of these tongues.
Yeah.
I collect these tongues because they were Smith made, you see.
Yeah, yeah.
And as you know, there isn't any blacksmith doing that kind of work now.
No, no.
And there's some of them tongues very old.
I suppose.
Yeah, sure. I mean to say, that tongues now wants to be refurbished. But an open fire is a very useful implement.
It is, of course.
It is. It's a very useful implement.
Isn't it? It is.
That's recorded, is it?
It is, yeah.
Ah, sure, we'll put down more turf in the fire near the end.
That's right.
Isn't that?
Have you any more of that?
What they say, the weather is
Dreary and cold.
very and cold.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, is right. Sure.
Oh, great.
Yes, my own well for water.
Oh, great.
A fine spring well within 150 yards of the house.
Good.
Or, that's it now.
No.
Well, to start off anyway, I suppose I'll have to introduce myself to the audience.
Oh, yes.
I'm Mick O'Dwyer now. I don't go in for any titles or I claim to be a direct descendant of Clare of the Glen, and I have all his life story written 100 years ago. The Glen of them all, isn't that it?
Yeah.
And I was born in Limerick, 1921. You see, there was no maternity home, hospital in Clare, them years. It wasn't there yet, but. And Bedford Row in Limerick was run by local family actually, the Kellys of Clonmurray. And all the Clare people at this side of the county went to Limerick to be born. On that account, you see, that our born at home, which of course was, well, they didn't think at the time. Couldn't get to the hospital. You were born at home. And I have a few summers since. I went to the Welsh school, Clonmurray, and there was 5 girls and 3 boys in the family. We had a little farm. We always helped at home and all that kind of thing. But as the time went on, we scattered out. Immigration, of course, was one of our things, the same as every other family in the townland. Immigration. England, America. I don't term in England myself, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And some of my family are still in the United States. My mother was God rest her, was a Cratloe woman, Cratloe, my native Cratloe, and down near Polly Bridge, that well-known landmark, there as you come from Limerick to 6 Mile Bridge, it is the bridge with the sharp turn. And my father was a Kilkisher man, from the bogs. So.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Oh, she was McNamara.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any history attached to those Macs?
Oh God, sure they were the direct descendants of the Fireball Macs. Oh God, sure.
Fireball.
Yes.
That known?
Huh?
Why would they call fireball?
Well, there would be, I suppose, the firbullocks, in other words, but it was abbreviated, it was shortened up. They called it the fireballs. They were the people that brought the clay to the top of the mountains and the hills in Clare area and cultivated the land. They were people, they were the real Irish that were pushed to the hills and to the mountains. It was to hill or to connacht. That was the slogan at the time with the British government, of course.
Yes.
That was their policy, and they were the people that were pushed onto the hills. Now these people were terrible industrious people to leave. And they were a clan, actually, the McNamara clan. And to the present day, I remember there was 40 families of McNamaras in the Clare area. But they have dwindled. Immigration again, of course, and families dying out and all that kind of thing. You had a lot of names in the Clare area, a repetition of names in the Clare area, like you had Keoghs, several families of Keoghs, you had Ryans, you had Egan's, the McNamaras, you had all them clans, and they were all nicknamed for the purpose of distinguishing one family from the other. You'd be surprised if I was to start to be laughable if I was to start quoting the names they called families for to distinguish them from each other. You see, you hadn't any other hope. You hadn't a hope. If you had 2 John Ryans in the one family, or if you had 2 John Egans or 3 or 4 Pat Egans in the family, sure, how were you going to find out except they had some nickname?
That's right.
You see, so it was. I know if I started to repeat them things now, people might consider it terribly offensive. It would be hurtful, maybe in cases, but they were nicknamed quickly anyway, to do their best, and of course the nickname will stick to you. I know families that had nicknames and we didn't know what their right name was. No, and they accepted it, had to do it, sure. The postman, where did he stand?
Yes.
If there wasn't some way of distinguishing, he'd be mixing up people's letters like nobody's business.
That's right.
But of course, the postman in the olden days, he was altogether different commodity to the modern postman. Modern postman arrives, in a van, and he drops you the mail into a box and he's gone. But he has a bigger route, of course, and all that kind of thing, and I suppose. But the postman in olden times, he was a different commodity. He was part of the social life of the structure of the country, the postman was. The postman now, we were in the Clare Postal District here at Dromline, in the townland of Dromline and the Barney Bunratty. Now, we weren't the last townland in the postman's itinerary for the day. He went as far as the mail order store in Shannon, from Cratloe Post Office, Cratloe Cross, where the supermarket is now, on foot. And he went to 3 days a week on foot. No bike, no nothing. He was a man by the name of Jim Barry, God rest his soul. I knew him. Small little man. He lived below Cratloe, and he got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to meet the mail train, to collect the mail, and to sort it at Cratloe Cross. And he went on the road on foot, and he came up by Bunratty, and 3 days a week to Shannon. He went as far as Smithstown then, on the Newmarket Road. He's doing that every day. Smithstown, where the riding school is presently. Smithstown House, Brennan's of Smithstown. And he came down and he came in Dromline, and he went down Rossmanaher. And he delivered the mail on foot. And he was terrible great postman. He was terrible strict on time and terrible strict on the post. The very minute it struck 6 o'clock at the post office in Clare, it was run by people by the name of Conbas. They were Italians. And Conbas and Biancanis. They were there in or about the one time. They were Italian. And he had, when he reached the post office, Conbas post office at the cross, Cretlow Cross, he had one leg on the street and he had another leg ready for to leave it into the post office floor when the big post office clock struck 6. Not a minute, second before it nor after it. He was that punctual. But he was so extreme that if, of course the country place was full of gentry, and they'd have big dogs and they'd eat you. Oh, there'd be 3 or 4 big dogs in every gentleman's place, and there you go within a mile of him. But it was very funny, you know. He could, the dogs would be out on the road waiting for him. And it wouldn't be easy, I can tell you, but to welcome him. And they'd be wagging their tails, and their gentry couldn't know, and they hailed, what charm had he for the dogs? Oh, the dog charmer is coming.
Oh, yes.
But nobody ever knew, bar one man, what the secret was. And the secret, I'll tell you the secret. He had a blacksmith, a cousin of mine, living near him. That's how I got to know. And the blacksmith, when he'd be shoeing the horses, you see, when he'd be putting the red shoe onto the horse's hoof, and he'd pair it for to shape the horse's hoof to fit the shoe, and the shoe to fit the horse's hoof, of course. The pairings of the horse's hoof would be fried. The dogs used to go mad for it. Sure, you always saw the forge in days gone by, and they'd be full of old dogs. And he used to have a pocket full of the horses' trimmings of the horses' hooves, and he'd be dropping it to the dogs along as he came, and the dogs would be mad for it, and they'd be out on the road waiting for him. But nobody ever knew that secret, only the blacksmith. And he'd have a small little container, and he'd have it full of the good fried trimmings for the postman when he'd come. But when the gentry would say to him, if they styled him Mr., he'd style him ma'am or Mr. back. And if they called him Barry, he'd call them by their surname as well. And if they called him James, which was his name, he said Patrick or Bridget or whatever, if they want him to wait to address a letter or something like that, he'd wait a given time, a minute. Give me a minute, they'd say, you see. And he'd pull out the watch and the minute. And the very minute was up. He turned around and we had to pursue him with whatever business you had to transact. He kept going. You asked him for a minute and he granted it. But that was. Then again, of course, the postman was. He was the man that not alone did he deliver the mail, but he brought the local news, birthdays and marriages along the road. Sure, like he knew everything that was happening in the houses, and he'd convey to you if there's somebody from Cratler to Ryan, as we called it that time, not Shannon indeed, had died. He'd mention it along the road, he'd give it circulation, you see. Ah yes, but in later years, the postman fulfilled that function too. It was alone that man. You always got the local news, and he'd arrive at the creamery and he'd deliver the mail, and he'd always, that's how you got to know things.
No.
we had a little farm and a small house, small thatched house actually, in dim days, and we always helped around at home when we were small. We all had our own jobs. I remember my mother bringing me, of course I was the eldest of the boys, you see, so I was of course a kind of precious until the next fella came along. But I remember my mother bringing us to mess and to school. We were brought to school on foot that time, 2 miles to school, and we walked it to school. We went on foot to school. There was no transport or anything like that. We walked it to school for ourselves. And then the neighbouring girls and my own sisters would bring me to school. My mother had something else to do besides trotting down to school with me. I was brought a turn or two maybe, but that's about all. And she'd have the household duties where there was 8 in family. And then again, there'd be work around the farm. She always helped in the farm. And there'd be few cows to be milked, and there'd be hay, and there'd be a few pigs, and there'd be geese and everything. Fowl and poultry, and the usual farm stock, sure. Few sheep, and they'd all have to be looked after, and we'd have to be looked after when we come home and fed and what haven't you. And she was strict on us. She made us do our jobs, and she made us do what we had to do. And when we had our jobs done, and when the family settled down for the evening, my father was a good scholar, and a very good scholar. And he done temporary, he was, what would you call it, a monitor?
Monitor. Yes.
Monitor. He'd done monitoring Kilkishen for the schoolmaster there for a short term of time when he was short after leaving school. And he caught us up in the night when the jobs were done, when the family had settled down, and he learned us our lessons. And he was very strict on how we behaved and what we done. You were told right from wrong, and you were told how to behave yourself on the road going to school, and at school and at home. And my God, you didn't give him back answers, and you didn't give your parents, and you didn't give the school teacher back answers. I tell you, you had respect for the priest when he came to teach at school. The Canon O'Dwyer, no matter God rest him. He was a grand man. He sat up on a high stool, and he taught the kids maybe for a couple of hours every day. But you were well behaved coming home from school, and you didn't have any bully tactics, or you didn't have any fisty fights or anything with the rest of the kids. But you came home about your business, and you obeyed the school teacher. Great respect for the school teacher, and there were 3 girls actually that taught us going to school. And I remember when I was small, the lads that had left at an early age to go to work with farmers in the locality, they weren't confirmed, they hadn't the sacraments got, and they came back. The adults used to call them, God, they were shaving and everything, man. When you see confirmation wouldn't be for 3 years, and they'd come back. They might be leave at 14. That meant to say they'd be 17 when they'd come back, and sure they were able-bodied men at that age. Able-bodied men that time. They'd be shaving and maybe a few of them smoking, but anyway, they'd come back, the adults, to learn the catechism to go for confirmation, to get confirmed. And them lads, I remember so well. They were, as I say, full-grown men. Well, they were as obedient to them women teachers as if they were children of 9 or 10 years of age. And they stuck their heads down into the catechism, and they learned their lessons. They'd come back for a couple of hours every day, or a couple of days a week, to learn the catechism, to get confirmed. And they were as obedient to them teachers, and they were afraid they'd live in life, even if the teachers weren't cross. But the great thing about the teachers in Clanmoney School, they always learn the scholars as a class. The whole class got the book and they read it together. The whole class learned their prayers. The whole class learned their poetry. They done their sums as a team. And with the strength of repetition, believe it or not, when we went into the higher classes, we were able to repeat, and we knew what the classes before us went as a result of listening to the class, repeating the poetry and the geography and the history and everything. But of course times have changed since, and I can tell you, if you stepped out of line or if you hadn't things in order, you got a clout and one you'd feel, and you'd get the cane, and you'd bear it, you'd take it in your stride, and there's no way whatsoever that you'd go home and repeat to your parents that you got a pig at school, nor your other members of your family wouldn't hang you either, they wouldn't spill the beans. That did never go home to your parents, that you got punished, or if you were caught talking, and you'd be put out of the class for a half an hour or so.
I mean, that's not hard anyway.
People,
we better leave it. So.
People are funny enough nowadays. Yeah. Coming and going to school, we had strict orders to behave ourselves anyway from home, and there'd be no pelting stones like all the young lads did at that stage. The P&T line was running along the road, you see, and there was earthenware insulators. We used to call them crocs, of course, that time, but they're known as insulators now, and of course they were the main target for a cockshot. that was the main target, and the road signs with little red studs on them, they came later. They were small little studs. Boher or Clare, Boher or Jazz, that I remember so well. There was, I suppose, the county council, I'd say, or that erected them. But they were great pastime for pigging them with stones too. But faith I tell you that I never pelted them with stones. But there was some crack shots. There were some crack shots in the team anyway. They could pick them off like slate halfpence men. But I'm sure the Gardaí were every day trying to catch them, but sure the Gardaí didn't. Of course they were doing terrible damage. They were putting their line out of commission and everything, but sure young lads, boys will be boys, won't they? Regardless, they'd pelt them, they could hear to me, if it cost them their life. But that's not the only vandalism that would be really and truly done along the road coming home from school. And we were strictly warned. We didn't do it. I never participated in that kind of thing at all. There was other lads along with me. I wasn't only one that there was any amount of good kids that didn't go for that at all. But usually when I'd come out from school in the evening, the retired schoolmaster lived up the road a bit from the school. He was a man by the name of Spillisy, George Spillisy. And George Spillisy taught school in Clanmoney. Sure. When education wasn't compulsory, you see. You could go to school if you like, and you could stay at home, but that's mostly, you see, my father belonged to that category. He went to school when he liked and stayed at home when he liked. But usually lads wouldn't stay at home. You'd meet the odd lad that had Mitch all right, but scheme they used to call it that time, not Mitch. But usually a young fellow wouldn't go to school because his father wanted him maybe in the meadow or maybe in the bog or go to the fair or something. He'd be kept at home on them grounds all right. But mind you, fair enough, they were keen on getting school education, you see. Now in Clonmoney, where I went to school, there was 3 different schools at that particular time. There was the Hill School, of course, just there in front of the Welsh Church. When you turn down to the Welsh Church, there was the Hill School with the Hedgemaster. And there was a Protestant school up in the Conor Frost, very near the Conor Frost yard. The Protestant school was called, I suppose, to be Church of Ireland or something for the children of other denominations. And the Welsh School then was erected by Dr. Kildene in 1840. He was the Bishop of Killaloe. He lived in Deer Park, there on the near 6 Mile Bridge. As a matter of fact, we had 2 bishops of Killaloe living in the Newmarket parish at different times, of course. Dr. Shaughnessy lived up in a place called Mogalan on the upper side of Newmarket. He was the Bishop of Killaloe as well. And in George Spillis's time now, the man I was telling you about that was retired, it was come a day go day in his time. But shortly after his retirement, it became compulsory to go to school. You got to go. But they used to come to him, and he was a great teacher. He was a genius. He was a great teacher. He was a genius. He was as good as any professor. There's nothing but he couldn't tell you or teach you or learn you, and he had a great method. He had no Irish that I'm aware of. You see, Irish, although it was the spoken language in Newmarket at one time, the Newmarket parish, but he had no Irish, because I remember when our teacher, the woman, was teaching us, she used to go back to the Gaeltacht every year to get her Irish, learn Irish, and there was a woman a poor woman on the road. She was from Galway. She was known to the scholars as native from Galway, and she, good fire there now, isn't it? She was a native speaker, native from Galway was. She was from the Gaeltacht. So she used to come into the school teacher every time she'd pass, and she'd get her donation, and she'd give her a rundown on anything she didn't know in the Irish language. She'd brief her, in other words, but native from Galway. So it was Connacht Irish we got, not the Munster Irish. It was the Connacht Irish we got.
Yeah.
But we got the Munster Irish at a later date, when our school teachers changed, you see. But my friend, Mr. Spillisy, he would come every evening, and he'd convey us a couple of miles up the road, and practical experience, that was his whole hobby. To teach a young fella to measure a field inside in the school was out as far as he was concerned. Bring him to the field in question, and he'd always have a tricky one selected, you see. He had an L-shaped field now in my area with a fairy fort in it, you see. A circular fort.
Yes.
And the L-shaped field was narrow at one end and it was wide at the other side. And to measure that, and by God, I tell you, you'd want all your hair on. And to the very inch, you were able to measure that because he told you how, and he showed you how, and he measured it for you. And Gunther's chain was the measure for. It was the tape at all. It was a chain with links in it. What, about 22 links or something that was on the Gunther's chain? I'm forgetting them things now. But he showed you how to do that. And when we were running that, man, then he'd tell you, oh yes, he'd tell you how to measure a tank to know how many gallons of water it would contain. And how to measure a block of wood to know how much it would weigh. Or to measure a reek of turf. He'd bring you into the back of a farmer's yard and he'd be there and he'd measure the reek of turf. Show you how to measure it. So you come out, you were nearly a surveyor.
Practically.
Yes. And mind you, I will say now, I was one of the lads that he always dwelt on for that kind of a thing. And I will say that in later years, I always remembered him for what he did for me. And I always knew how to measure a field. If I bought a field of hay or bought a garden for tillage during the war years, I was able to go out and without any Gunther's chain. I never owned the legs, although, mind you, I tried hard to be the other one. Not for measuring purposes, but for keeps. Of course, they're not in being at all now. But if ever I come across one, by heavens, it will be mine. And I was always able to measure my own piece of ground and give a rough estimate. You see, there was a lot of hearsay when a man would be selling you a field of hay to be measured maybe 50 years before, and there'd be always a couple of perches extra going on to it, and money was scarce. And you know, you didn't want to be fooled anyway, taken for a ride up the garden path. But when we were running the schoolmaster, he was the second round of education we had during the day. We had the National Teachers Force, we then had the retired schoolmaster. And when we came home, my father saw we finished up pretty good scholars at the end of the day. And another great thing they made you was spelling. Spelling was very important. You spelt. Very important to spell, and the proper pronunciation of words. You didn't say this, that, these and those. The schoolmaster had a list, and if anybody said this or that, he said this, that, these and those, many another. And Peter Necton's daughter went down the street for a can of water, he'd say to you. He'd make you know that, there's a lot of this old this and that at the present time. Bad pronunciation. Mm-hmm. You see, there's elocution.
Yes.
You had it. You always had a course in that. And if you were inclined to pronounce your words wrong, and well, a lot of people maybe hadn't, they weren't able to pronounce them. Maybe they had a speech problem. But he shamed you into, But the next man we came across after leaving the schoolmaster, of course, the retired schoolmaster, was a local farmer. He had an orchard, and his cousin again on the side of the road had another orchard. He had about an acre of an orchard, and of course, at that particular time, young lads wouldn't eat an apple now, hardly, they'd pilch you with them. But at that particular time, to rock an orchard, as they used to say, was it was the highlight of young lads' life. They loved it. They just lived for it, man. But the young fellas that was going further up the road than I was, going on up along the Newmarket Road and the locality, they'd come to raid or rock this orchard on their way home from school. And maybe after going to school in the morning. But they'd be coming a long distance and they'd have ponies and traps and what happens you. And they'd tie the ponies to the gate at the cross. And girls and all, the whole lot. I remember that 15 or 16 of them arrive to raid this orchard, or rock the orchard as they said. And the old man would be, he was a very old man, he'd be in his 80s, but he was the man with the black hard hat and what would it be, a bowler hat wouldn't they call it, they'd be calling it I think. And he had the white, stiff white front and the swallowtail coat. He was a very old man and of course that's a long time ago. And he'd come out, or he'd be brought out, they'd call him if he wasn't there, in order to aggravate him of course. And he hadn't a hope, he'd come out with a big black dog and stick in. He was a nice man, he'd give them apples, all the apples they wanted, if they approached him. But no, the novelty was in the raid, and to raid the orchard. So he'd come out, and he'd be waiting out around the road. They used to pelt the roofs of his outhouses, and he had a grand thatched house, and they'd pick rocks up on the roof of the outhouse and all that kind of thing. But he'd always be out, and due to the fact that my family, yes, and there was other lads besides, but they'd be gone maybe at a different time. He'd be always out, and he'd grab me by the hand, and he'd convey me for a mile up the road home, and he'd be telling me, he'd be tracing local history, people that lived in the area, famine days, and what he did when he was going to school, and of course put the hedgemaster and all that kind of thing, and he'd be telling us about the famine days and the church. He was always explaining to us about the church and what went on in the parish, like, and he'd be telling us about the farmers, churchmen, and he'd be telling us all about Columbkill's prophecy. He was very good on that. There was supposed to be a family in the parish that had Columbkill's prophecy. So he had extracts from that, of course. But his version of Columbkill's prophecy was anyway that, though of course there was no airport now when he spoke of your breakfast in Ireland, in Rhiannon, and your dinner in America. There was no airfield, there was no aircraft, we'd know what an aeroplane was. It would be the Wright brothers and so forth would be the people that would be involved in trying to fly that time. I remember even Lindenberg, Captain Lindenberg, and I remember he coming to Rhiannon in some kind of a biplane even in later years when I was growing up, but there was no aircraft. But he spoke of it. We didn't know how you were going to reach America even. He didn't even mention that. Only that you'd have your breakfast in Rhiannon. He said that'd be Shannon now, and your dinner in America. And that was according to Columbkill. And there'd be a town in Rhiannon, he said, big town, and that the houses from Innis to Limerick would be giant, that there'd be a town, a city from Innis to Limerick, all the houses. There'd be such a lot of houses in the country. And you know it is coming to pass, plainly, all the houses along the line. And a battle at Firgrove Gate, that would be at sure what we'll call the airport cross now, Ballycasey Cross. And that was only, when I was going to school, that was only a little, what they call a dirt road. No tar, no concrete, no anything on it. I remember the concrete road to be made. And like, due to the fact that we were told these things, we were always very interested in what was going on, because we had been told in advance that there'd be a town at Rennes, and we had been told in advance that there'd be that you'd have your breakfast and all that kind of thing. And, we had been told that in advance, so we were very interested, and I said, that we were fairly well aware as things developed and as times went on. We fairly knew what was online. He had a lot of that kind of stuff from Columkill, but also he said that when St. Columkill prophesied a lot of things for Ireland, he prayed that half what he prophesied wouldn't come to pass, but hopefully a lot of it won't. Of course, my friend told us all about Kiltamach, Colchimach, Ballinamok, the Valley of the Black Pig. That's where, at the end of the world, when we were doomed, that's where we were going to wind up, in Ballinamok, and all that kind of, he had all that kind of story. But he prophesied about the war and the battle at Ballycasey Cross, Forgrove Gate, and that you'd go, several things would happen to the country and all that kind of thing. But he also had St. Ballycasey's prophecy, which wasn't as severe as St. Columkill's, but St. Columkill's prophecy, according to him, was written in Latin, and it was a priest in 6 Mile Bridge that used to translate it, and he used to give it to the people that had the prophecy, and they distributed it around. I saw leaflets going around myself of Columkill's prophecy with a man. I remember reading them when I was a small boy, and he had a lot of that stuff. But I suppose folklore and prophecy nearly travel hand in hand. Folklore, of course, is the next step.
Mm-hmm.
But you know,
In order to stop the switching off.
oh yes, of course the matchmaking thing was a more serious thing than a lot of people thought to make gaff out of the, No, as I mentioned to you there earlier on about no compulsory education.
Mm-hmm.
You see,
Yeah.
of course, it was British rule that was here. You see, and of course they didn't want to educate us. With the result that the schoolmaster, he was in the same category as the priest. There was a price in his head, in all probability. So he only taught school in the quiet, and he had maybe abroad by the hedge. That's how it got the head schoolmaster, a quiet spot. He'd be teaching pupils, and they'd be stealing in from all corners, and maybe outhouses and all the rest of it. So there was a share of school, his schools along the country. The schoolmaster would usually be put up. He was one of the roving kind, of course. He couldn't live permanently anywhere, because if he was caught, he wouldn't be executed. No, the priest would, and there was a price on his head, and of course there was also a price on the bishop's head that particular time too. £15 for a bishop and £5 for a priest's head, and £5 for a wolf's head. Yeah. And there was a man in Kilkishen, and he collected headage for that kind of a thing. Yeah. If he could get information where the priest was, or where the bishop was, or where the schoolmaster was. But I'd say deported. Van Diemen's Land, I'd say, would be the punishment, deportation for the schoolmaster. They may not execute him, he wasn't criminal enough in their eyes, but he'd be deported. He'd get Van Diemen's Land, or maybe the island of St. Helena if he was aggressive enough, but however, everyone knows about them places. But with the result that he taught school in the quiet, and he was paid a salary by the parents of the pupils. He gets, I have a list there of what the headmaster used to collect now. Sixpence from families and all that kind of thing, and he'd get kept in the house for a week, a fortnight, a month, and he'd teach the children their lessons. There was another man that used to go on the road too, and that was the music teacher. But he wasn't banned, but he used to go from house to house and parish to parish, and private tuition. He teach the, I remember myself, a man in Dromline, funny thing now, he was, used to teach music privately. He was a man by the name of Martin Clancy. And you know that I have done research into Martin Clancy. He taught in all the gentry. He taught music to all the gentry, he taught in their houses. And he went in and lived in and gave him 6 months stint, 12 months if they were able to keep him. And he learned them to play on the violin. He was a master craftsman, of course. He used to, I'll tell you what he used to do now. He used to compose music even. Well now, Martin Clancy, I researched him, and as far as I can gather, he was a West Clare man, and he would be a relative of Willie Clancy's, the great Clare musician, Willie Clancy. But of course he was long before Willie Clancy's time, but he was that line of musicians, and he was that family. So we had a few high school teachers in the locality. The high school was in Clonmoney. We had one in Dromline, up there at the cross, and the one in Clonmoney was before the official national school was built by the Bishop of Killaloe, the Most Reverend Dr. Kennedy. He lived down in Deer Park on the 6 Mile Bridge border there. And the Reverend Dr. Kennedy was known as the Castle Bishop. He was very friendly with the people in Dublin Castle, and as a result he got concessions that other bishops wouldn't get, or other clergy wouldn't get. Like, they'd no more let him build a school there. They'd put his head on a pike below Moratty Castle, or have him in the quicklime in the courtyard. But due to the fact that he kept on good terms with the old castle people, they let him peg away. But the headmaster was just across the road from the little road that turns you into the Wills Church off the main 6 Mile Bridge Road. And the man done his education there, and the people of the parish in the quiet, and lucky enough he got away with it. But anyway, the parish was noted for people being very loyal and very quiet. They wouldn't spy on him or they wouldn't hang him, but he produced great scholars. He produced some great scholars. And we had the poet. We had poets, and we had literary men as a result of his education. Well, when the when the Will School was built in, the old school, there was no compulsory education there either. You could go come there if you like either, but the schoolmaster was paid and all that kind of thing. That's the only difference. But the other school that was in Clonmoney was up in the Corner Frost. He was the county coroner. And the school would be there before the coroner's time. I forget now. I'm sure it was in the houses of Clare there. Who the owner would be at the time of that particular estate. He would build the landlord type, of course, anyway. And that was official. That school would be official. The headmaster there would be, he would be appointed by the government, of course, the British government at the time. He'd be official. He wouldn't have any problems. But they were very anxious to get the local Catholic into that school, so that they'd be brought up in the Protestant religion, you see, and all that kind of thing. And of course the times were very bad. And with soup houses and soup being dished out in the famine years and everything, they used it as a kind of a bribery maybe, for to get the children in there. See, mind you, if your stomach was empty, your belly was empty, you would do many things maybe for. But anyway, as far as the Catholic population in this area was concerned, anyway, it was a success. The old locality wasn't too poor. Newmarket parish was a good parish, you see. You had a lot of very well off people, and you had the rich and fertile lands of Bunratty, and you had it Tradery, as it was known. From Latoon Bridge to Bunratty Bridge was all very good land, and the area didn't suffer too bad from the famine in comparison to other areas now. Take, we say, the Cratlow area back along into Broadford and all, back along the mountain, back into Galway, Clare Galway. That area was poor, and the people were poor. They were very thrifty, they were great people to live, but they hadn't the wherewithal, you see. And it would be a different set-up altogether to the landed gentry that you'd have in the Newmarket parish. Tradery, Rainana, all that area along there. That was great country. So it wasn't too easy to lure in the Catholic population. But then again, you had a big Protestant population in Tradery. You see, you had the landed gentry. Bunratty, you had the Daltons, the Dawsons, the Frosts, the Kennys, the Morrises, the Waltons. You had back along then you had the G Quinns and all them people again on the same footing then in Newmarket. You had the Protestant school, of course, in Newmarket as well. And you had the soup houses, and you had the stairs, you had the Vandeleurs, the Morrows, like where you had all them kind of people. You had a lot of rich people, and they weren't short of food in the famine years. So they gave employment too, of course. There was good employment with them gentry. And at the end of the day, I suppose it all added up. And they brought in people to work, and they put them into their houses. You see, they had houses, and they had estates, they had houses, and they had lodges, and they're craftsmen. See, in Dromline now, Dromline estate now, Newmarket will say, they had a lot of property, they had a lot of houses, and they gave big employment. You had Morris's there on the 6 Mile Bridge Road, Francie Morris, he had a lot of houses in his estate, and they were given to his employees. You had the Stoddarts of Bunratty, and they had a lot of houses in their estate, and they gave it to their employees. Good housing. And there'd be the landlord's property, of course, and you had the Vendelors in Relahine. They had a lot of houses, and of course, hence you had evictions. But they brought people in specially their own, usually their own colour, we'll say, their own kit and kin, and they got them into them houses. And anyone then that had property from the landlord, he had no hesitation in throwing them out. Usually the people that worked for him were loyal subjects, and they were probably English and all that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, sure they got wiped out. So I'd say that would cover that in the things now for you and the hit schools, because of course you also had the mess and the mess rock.
Yes. Where were they located around here?
Oh, they were. And that was set out in the fields and in quiet places too, because if they were caught, sure the priest was in the room, like. And that bill outside, that was one of the penal days bills. That was wrong for the evictions in East Clare. My grandfather or great-grandfather used to get it up on a horse and car and cover it with hair straw. And he'd ring it was portable, of course. That's in the family for generations and generations. And he'd ring it the day before Mass was going to be said in the locality. And he'd ring it, give it a tip pass on a house. And he'd give it a tip pass on the next house, cover it up again, of course, quick. And everyone in the locality had know that there was going to be Mass at a certain day in the locality, and they're out, and they used to do sentry. Yeah. The locals would do sentry. It was all arranged, pre-arranged, and when they'd hear the bell, they'd know that there was going to be Mass in Ballycuneen, Townland, and they knew where the Mass rock was, and they'd do sentry. And there's no hope that the redcoats would swoop on the people going to Mass or the priest unawares. The sentry was always out, and he was kind of a tic-tac man. He'd give the token to the fella that was in some other vantage point, and so on and so forth, all along the line. And very seldom or ever, the clergyman would be caught. Good. So it was tough times, really, you know. But
going back for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
To see if the 10 seconds.
Well, another feature of Irish life, of course, in my young days was the Coordie house. It is known in this area as the Coordie house. Known in other areas, of course, as Cayley house or Ramblin house or whatever have you. But it was where there'd be maybe, usually to be held where there'd be a bachelor or two, where some fella wouldn't be married, and he'd have, like all the local lads that should have nothing else to do, for want of better. They'd gather in the night and they'd have a game of cards, maybe. Lots of cases they wouldn't have cards, because cards wouldn't, they wouldn't, Coordie house, that wasn't the best thing in the world for them. Where there'd be a bachelor living, the law and order mightn't be great, and lads would be disputing about games and hence the cards, and it was usually rolled out. It would be a kind of more or less a conversation session and the news of the day, and if there was in days gone by, if there was a newspaper available, there'd be one man and he'd be commissioned to read the newspaper, to give all the daily news. Everyone wouldn't have newspapers, and there was no, the media was very backward altogether. There was no television, there was no radio, no nothing, sure. And all you'd know about your relatives would be maybe visit them of a Sunday if they were within radio, see you on. If they were abroad, it would be by letter or travel. Travel was very bad, of course. Of course, the Corday house was a favourite place for fairy tales and all that kind of thing, when lads wouldn't have anything better to do. They'd start telling ghost stories, and a lot of them true and a lot of them false, of course. And another very important feature in the fairy tale or the ghost story was if there was a few sits in the house in the night and lads would be telling ghost stories, to get local girls would collect in, and you frighten the living life from with ghost stories. It was a great method of getting home or something. They'd be afraid their lives to go home. So the bigger ghost, the better ghost story you had, the better chance you had of conveying them home. It was a great way. But I suppose the girls would be delighted. I often myself enjoyed the crack, you know. If the ghost story wasn't coming, you'd often see the girl and she'd be mad for to get home with some fella, and she'd start off herself to get the thing underway, so as that it was a great excuse, like, that she was afraid of her life to go home, and some fella'd have to convey her home. But that was one of the things. But to instill terror into anyone, the ghost stories that used to be heard and told about the banshee and people that had died being seen. Personally, I believed in ghost stories myself, but not in all the ghost stories, of course. Fellas used to invent it. A great man to tell you a ghost story was a man that had drink taken. He'd see any amount of queer things, but that wouldn't work at all. You always knew the man that was telling you the truth, and you always knew the person that wasn't. But there was people, and definitely they saw ghosts. They were a breed in themselves. I suppose they were spooky or psychic or something. I don't know what you would call it, but I didn't come into that category myself. I believed in the ghost story, and a lot of the things that happened were the truth, and people that told them were reliable people. But when you got a ghost story from a reliable person, of course, you were inclined to believe it. But when you got it from someone that would be inventing things for the sake of conveying a girl home, well, he wasn't a great man to go telling you stories, because you wouldn't believe him. But anyway, why I was so sure about the ghosts, as we'll call them. You know, there is a difference between ghosts and fairies. The fairies are the good people. They're a myth, of course. You could be telling people about the fairies for the rest of your life, and they'd be as easy to believe as to find out. The fairies are a myth, but the ghost, the supernatural, is a different commodity altogether. They'd be telling you about leprechauns and what haven't you. But believe as much as that you like. But I tell you that if you hear the banshee, you'd have a different view of things. I heard the banshee on 2 occasions myself. The first occasion I heard the banshee, no, I never took a drink or anything like that. So I wasn't under or drink or drugs or anything like that, or any kind of medication. I was never to a doctor in my life until I broke my leg. Thanks be to God. But like, there wasn't any reason in the world why I could be under any delusion in my sober senses after my day's work going to do about my business. There's no way that I could be seeing things or hearing things. But on the first occasion, I owned this piece of land here, and I was living a mile and a half over the road. So I had sheep, and they were ewes. There were sheep that were going to have lambs, and I lived a mile and a half away, as I tell you, and I always looked after them sheep at a late hour of the night and early hour of the morning. And since I came over here to live, my ewes were looked at every hour of the day or the night. That's at lambing time. You see, you had the predators, you had the fox, and you had the grey crow, and you had dogs and what haven't you, and especially when you were living away from where the sheep were, you had all sorts of things. So you had to give protection to your sheep and lambs. And the grey crow, he was up on top of and as a matter of fact, he was up on top of the big tree, and he had sensory powers. And so had the raven that lived in the castle nearby. He's only across the road there. He was up in the castle in the night, and everything that happened by way of a sheep having lambs or anything getting killed on the road or anything like that, he smelt the blood, the fresh blood, and he was there at cockcrow in the morning before you. So you had got to be on your toes. But what I used to do for the late hours of the sheep, I used to go to a neighbour's house on Court, as we'll call it, and he was a man that lived by himself. Two brothers lived by themselves, and they were great men for playing cards, but they never played cards in their own house, nor they never allowed cards to be played in their own house. Funny thing now. Although they played all over the country in dance halls and halls and neighbours' houses and everything. I never saw a hand of cards played in that house. I never played cards myself. I never particularly liked them. But they were great gamblers. There was one of them, he was an outstanding gambler, and for the count or anything, when he could run it off and he could go back, and if there were 20 games of cards played in the house, he could go back in the first game of cards and he could play every card again on the table. He could recount. He was a terror. But I'd go to their house in the night, and I was very friendly with the two boys, the two elderly men. I was very friendly with him, and one of them would be gone off in court himself, and the second fella might be, he'd always have the house open to us anyway. We were well behaved, and there'd be no drink, there'd be no local pub, there'd be no nothing. All the lads had collected and they'd have their old spin, and they'd be talking about the happenings of the day in the farms and what happened here, there and everywhere. And so, the topic of the day. And there'd always someone remain on until one of the lads would come home. The fire would be kept down and the light would be there, and no woman, of course. They'd love to come home and find the fire still lighting, and lads would be by themselves, and then they'd be lonesome too. There was a lot of that in it with bachelors. That's how I could nearly ring the Samaritans here now, although I'm living in a fine populated area. I could nearly ring the Samaritans here in the day, only for the kind of a man I am, that I converse with people and that I know people and that I have I adapt a good old attitude towards people, and they know when they come they're welcome, and there'll always be something that they like to hear, and there'll be something fresh, and there'll be a bit of old folklore for the man that wants folklore. I'll always not tune into the man's station anywhere, the woman's station that'll come, if they're interested in local history, or if they're interested in what happened 100 years ago, or if they're interested in fairies or ghosts or you name it. I'll always tune into that station, and I'll always give them a bit of local information, and they'll always come for it too. And if they want to know anything, they'll always come. I'd be the kind of the local authority, if I would like to put it that way. So I collected all this old data from the courtly houses and the old people. And so anyway, I used to stay with late in this man's house in the night. It had to be sort of 1 o'clock in the night when I'd be coming out of his house. And I'd always, on my bicycle, I'd go to the sheep and see him with a flash lamp before I go home and go to bed, and I'd be there in the morning again at cockcrow. But this night I was coming anyway to see my sheep. It would be the spring of the year, sure. Sure you'd be seeing them from Christmas on, like. Well, I wouldn't have lambs that early now as Christmas, but occasionally the old ram would steal a march and you would have that occasional couple of ewes coming in with early lambs, and you'd always know when they were going to have lambs anyway soon. And I went to I'd be coming on my bicycle, but I was coming this night on my bicycle, and as I came, you come around in a circle, semicircle. The house, a corner as you came the road would be going round in a circle until I came to my farm. You know, right round by the cross there now and down. And when I came out from the house, from the men's house on Coburg to go to the sheep, I got up on my bicycle to cycle away. Grand cab night, and spring of the year, and I heard what I thought after a while was the wailing sound, you know, wailing. I got, it was very far away from me, it was a mile, 2 miles away, but I took it to be an old dog. You know, old dogs cry in the night, and the way they're crying. If they're tired, and an old female dog knocking around somewhere, they'll be always crying and they'll be whinging. But I took it to be the old dog. I took them all not to it. But faith as I came along the road, faith, the cry got louder and louder. And when I came to the local crossroad, it became evident that it was the dog, that the sound was crossing the country, the crying. And when I came near the house at the cross, there was a dwelling house at the cross. I got bold, of course. I got courage, 'tisn't that I was terrible cowardly, as far as the dog was concerned anyway, or anything like that. I laid my leg on the dyke with the intention of finding out really and truly what the crying was about, or the wailing. And faith, I tell you, it didn't take me too long at all until I discovered that it wasn't a dog, but it was something else that I wasn't able to lay my finger on, only to say that it was the banshee. But it passed within about 200 yards of me. But it passed on its way, and I decided that I wouldn't go any further for myself at that hour of the night, my flash lamp. I left my sheep without being seen that night, but they were okay though. And I came home, and just when I came home and put on the light at home, well, sure, the family were in the house even. It was then I got frightened really. But that was that episode over. But on another occasion, I used to trap rabbits, and of course that was a job that you done in very lonesome parts of the country. You went into the land and you went into the heart of the country, and that was a night job. You'd set the traps in the evening, and at about 9 or 10 o'clock, you'd take out the first crop. The rabbits would come out to graze, and you'd trap them and you'd take them out. And from that until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you'd be out, taking them out of the old snares and traps. And you would go home then, you'd go to bed for a couple of hours, you'd be out again, at daybreak again. You see, you wouldn't leave them in the traps as only as short a time as you could. And anyway, when they start to screech and make noise, the fox would come and the cat would come and everything that would kill a rabbit and eat him. So you'd have to compete with him for your rabbits. And this night, myself and my brother, we were asked by a man that owned an old farm that was full of rabbits, and he had a big mansion. He was a nice old bloke, and he had a big mansion in the old farm. It was reputed to be haunted. So that didn't bother us whether it was haunted or not, because we didn't believe that much on that kind of a yarn. All we were interested in was the rabbits, to get that. It was full of them. Man, it was a bonanza. So we were delighted when he approached us, because he was a man that wouldn't let anybody in to do that kind of a job. Nor he was a wildlife man, actually. Great man on wildlife. The fox or the badger or anything like that wouldn't be molested. You were publicly in number one if you thought that you killed a fox or a badger. And the birds, yeah, he had old ponds and lakes and old estates, and we were surprised that he let us trap the rabbits. But his idea, there was no myxomatosis that time, by the way, but his idea was trap the rabbits, they're getting too plentiful and they'll be inbred. Trap the rabbits out, weed them out, and you'll have a new crop coming up. Well, his strategy was good and very good and right. But we didn't mind what his strategy was, so long as we got the rabbits. So we got in. And of course they were never trapped in years. They were real greenhorns. They'd be different to where the rabbits would be getting trapped and snared on a regular basis, or ferreted. The devil wouldn't catch them because they were wily. But we got into his place and he made sure we made a packet. Old rabbits were £half a pair. And bring them into Limerick on bicycle. So we'd catch the rabbits by day and bring them to Limerick by night, and we'd catch the rabbits by night, and we'd bring the rabbits into Limerick to the poultry merchant. Casey's and Barrett's were the two poultry merchants in Limerick, and we'd try the two of them to which was given the most on the day. It used to be a great crack, but we went out our rabbits anyway, and we set out traps. Oh, we had a lot of old traps. We sit all day, and our only worry was that he'd hear them screeching in the night, you see. Because if you had him screeching, I suppose he might get he's too humane. And he might run us, but if we got a week out of him anyway, it would be the grandest in the world, which we did. So, fine. We set our traps. We often backed up the churchyard wall in the night and made it our base to clear the traps, and we weren't one bit afraid. You see, you'd get so used to being out in the night that you'd become a night owl. But we would be a bit afraid. So we backed up the outhouse wall in the old estate, big outhouse, and we backed up the outhouse wall, and we had all our gear there, and it was a great vantage point, and we cleared the traps all around us in a circle. So Faith out in the night. It would be midnight, it wouldn't be too late. We heard the crying, and myself and the brother, we heard, two of us heard it. It was the question, one of us hearing it at all. In our sober senses, trying to keep our traps empty, and we heard the crying at a distance first. And Faith, after a very short time, few minutes, 5 minutes, Faith, we came to the conclusion that we had our banshee, because it became clear, plain as a pikestaff. But we stood our ground. We had to shut. We had no other option, because we were in from the road, we were in the old estate, and it was very lonesome. Oh Lord, it was very lonesome, because there was it was wooded. There was trees, and there was shrubs, and there was hedges and bushes and birds in the old trees, and they're stirring, and oh by God, you wouldn't want bad nerves. But our banshee passed right up to the mansion, and God knows, we were shocked, I can tell you. I'd say she circled the mansion, frightened us, but by God, like two boys, the two of us in it, and we were two good hardy lads. And we had a storm lamp, I remember. Ah man, if you were the order of a flash lamp that time, you'd be well off. This was a storm lamp. It was a paraffin lamp with a circular globe in it. And it was protected by wire mesh. And no matter how the wind did blow, it would hardly ever quench it. It would be very rare. It would want to be a storm, a real storm, to quench it. And we had our storm lamp there, and we listened to the banshee, and she went after a bit. But the Lord save us, the wailing would deafen you. It was something cruel. But that family anyway, that particular family anyway, it was known that everybody knew that in the case of a death or a marriage, in the case of a woman, the banshee cried at the wedding of a woman if she married a person of the same name. Now, it would be a frost. She cried for certain families of the frost, and she cried in the case of certain when they died or when the women got married to a frost, which was a kind of a regular occurrence with the frost. They intermarried for to keep the property in the families, you know. But she frightened us all right, but we stuck it out, Faith. And we collected our rabbits. But I'm telling you, when it came midnight, 2 or 3 o'clock, we skated at home fairly brisk. The one thing about the banshee was that she was rarely heard after midnight, and she could never cross a stream, where there be a stream. If there was a bridge over the stream, they always told us that. But oh my God, yes, I'm leaving out something there now. She was heard in the locality in the middle of the day. By several people for a whole fortnight. The crying was heard in the middle of the day. That's common knowledge in the locality yet now. There'd be several people now if I was able to. There'd be several people now that if I wanted to verify that in the morning, that would back me up on that one. That heard of themselves. The man lived in the fields. He was a man of the Hastings. There's no use in telling you the story without telling it all to you. He was a man of the Hastings, and the Hastings, of course, were cromwell planters, the same as the Frost. It is a bit of history, and the banshee followed the Hastings as well, in a death, but not in the case of a marriage, I think. And this man of the Hastings, I knew him well, very well. He was a very good friend of the family, actually, and a very good friend of mine. He was a very nice man, and he was a very popular man entirely. He had a fine farm of land, and he had a farm of land across the road even here from me. But he was a very popular man. He was a fine fellow, and very popular, and he was a very knowledgeable man where livestock was concerned, you see, because them years that I'm talking about now, I'm going back. Today or yesterday I'm talking about to you at all there all along the line now. I'm going back 60, 70 years. And I'm gone back further, so I'm gone back as far as 1840 to you. But this man of the Hastings that I'm telling you about now, he was very popular because one of the things that made him so popular was he was a good neighbour, of course, great neighbour, and very obliging. He was a great man about livestock, and there was no vets sometimes. Now, I'll tell you, if there was himself, there might be a visit to Limerick, but he was known locally. And anyway, he'd be costing a pound or £2 at a time, at least maybe. And people weren't able to afford it. And the livestock hadn't all the diseases that they have now, because the reason for people have livestock having diseases now and animals having diseases now is overproduction is one of the main reasons. And the generations of livestock have been worn out through this insemination. There's no harm to include this in your tape. Mass production in poultry or livestock or sheep or anything like that will generate diseases. And the cattle long ago had them diseases at all. You have cattle now inside in slatted houses, this, that and the thing down top of each other. You had that at all before. The cattle were housed, the cows were housed in small numbers, and they were regulated. There'd be 8, 7 or 8 cows in a house, and that was that. Not 50 or 60 like today. And there's 50 or 60 cows and cattle in the farm now that there was only 4 or 5 and a few cows. This mass production thing, the diseases that was in that man's time that I'm telling you about now, and in my young days, they were all standard diseases. You had Morden, of course, was one of the things, and red water. They were the black water. They were the three main diseases, and you had a share of TB, but not as much TB as there is at the present time, and abortion and all that kind of thing. They were able to counteract that abortion thing with quack medicine, funny enough. Quack medicine. And a ball of blue used to cure the red water. Now I'm giving the chemist £42 for a bottle of injection bottle, and you know what? A ball of blue is a harmless chemical. You could nearly drink it yourself. But the injection you're getting now is a different commodity altogether. But this man used to give the ball of blue, and he used to give the medicine for the murmur and all that kind of thing. He used to cure the animals all around him, and his own included. And when he was dying then, he was such a popular man, so the whole country came to see him. But where he lived himself and his family in the fields. And the loop road, as I'm telling you, if you were to go around by the loop road and in the little bore in into his house, you had to go about 3 miles. Whereas if you from the back at the loop road, you had only 300 or 400 yards in through the fields. But the banshee cried up the field in the day as the people went in to see him. She was heard in the daylight, in broad daylight. People even went to the house and they thought that was the way he was dead, and that his sister-in-law and step family that was there, that he had died. They were elderly people too. They thought he was dead. And when they heard the crying, you see, they thought they'd be crying after him. People used to cry after relatives that time when they die. But now it is different. They're only watching you to know how much did you live when you die, how quick will you die. But in them years, but when she cried up there in the middle of the day, we all heard her. I was living that time within 200 yards of his house, across the field, as I tell you. But we all heard the banshee. She was common knowledge that everyone. But that was the most. She didn't frighten anyone. No. She cried in the window that night. The people that was minding him even. The people who stood up in the night, the neighbours went in and stood in the house and minded him. When the family got, he was a long time sick. He died of senile decay, of course. He died of no disease as such, but he died of old age. And the people went in, the neighbours went in, and they're doing their term there and minded him, but he died eventually, and that finished it. But it was, everyone had her in that case. But
the other 2 occasions that you had the banshee, did anybody die on those days?
That's the thing about it, is that they did, you know.
Did they?
I heard that the following morning that there was a man of the Frawleys died over in the Rallahine area, and in a short time after the old gentleman, there was a death in that family. Given us the trapping of the rabbits, there was a death in that family as well. But certain families, they're supposed to be Irish families, but Macarrow you surely know. But I doubt, sure the Frost no, and the Hastings, and the Kellys was another family, and the McInernys. There were families that Banshee was followed, but when they died, but they were sure the McInernys and sure they would be Irish families, sure, if I suppose. But I don't know what the story was. But
Did you ever see a ghost yourself?
well, I did, you know. One ghost I saw anyway. I saw anyway in actually daylight was my grandfather from my father's side. My father was an old man when he died, and it was great, you know, with him. He had 2 birth certificates. You see, when he was born, the registration at birthdays and marriages wasn't too up to date. And there's several people I know, and when it came to they've been 70 years of age, or in or about 70, or maybe they might be nearer to 80, you let them. There was no birth certificate when they went looking for their birth certificate, and they thought they'd be about 70, you see. There was no birth certificate, and it was a local man, a local old man. He might be a justice of the peace or something, or he'd be a man in authority. I knew myself now had the creamery manager, and he was in the JP. He certified several people that came from his side of the country, that they would be the age, because he was an old man himself, and he remember going to school with him and all that kind of thing, and he was a reliable witness anyway. So they got out pension, sure, it was only 5 or 6 bob at the time anyway, sure. Of course, that was a lot of money to get that time. But my father, he had two birth certificates. One said he was born in 1844, and the other said he was born in 1840. So when he wanted to get the pension, he produced the 1841, and sure, I suppose he was 1840, but he never wanted to make himself old, you see.
Oh, yes.
One of them was a birth certificate, and the other was a baptismal certificate. That's the way it went. But the baptismal certificate said that he was 1840, and his birth certificate, he was registered for being born. Sure, I suppose there was no registration unit at all at the time. So he was 4 years old, and he was registered for his. But anyway, he was a very healthy, strong man always. He was a very healthy man, never smoked or anything like that, and he was very quiet. Very quiet, strong-willed. What you took into his head, by heavens, he done it. As he always said, no power on earth, and you couldn't frighten him. Oh, because we often tried to prank on him now when we grew up, you know. I remember one day, there was a big cavity in under Dromline Castle, and it was dangerous looking. You see, the big cavity, it was in under the foundation, and he was bringing the stones out of it. And didn't we stay around the corner of the castle when we brought his dinner, and we jumped in, and he was gone in under the bloody thing. He never stood, or he never even looked around to see who did it. We'd knock as much as a hop out of him. But he'd laugh at the idea of that, man. He would laugh heartily at the idea of a thing like that. You were trying to frighten him. Sure, well, that'd be grand for you now. You're getting a good shot there now, surely, to God.
Yeah.
As I was telling you there about my father being a very strong-willed man.
Yes.
When it came to he dying, he didn't want to die, but he used to go into a coma, of course, and he'd have left himself again and straightened himself up, and I'll defy it. But I never saw a man, or I never knew a man to cater for himself when he was dead. That's a queer statement now, but when I'll explain it to you, like he did. he contributed to all the people and institutions and organisations, religious organisations, that would pray for you forever, even when you die. He enrolled himself and he became a member of the Liverpool Cathedral. Anyone that contributed to the building of that, they went into the book in the cathedral, and any prayers that was offered from there were offered forever for the cathedral and the church was the church. So he'd be prayed for eternity. he catered for himself that way. He never depended in his family or his this or that or the thing to pray for him. He joined the organisations that specialised in that. It is about 35 years ago, so my father died, and I was in the garden. I was doing old tillage, and when I came home in the night, there was a swinging at the gate, you see, and the horse was swinging, and I tied him to the currant bush. There was a big pier, and as I was tying him to the currant bush, it was a young horse. The man with a hat, as I thought, passed in behind the car. I was at the front of the car, and he passed in at the back, the heels, and I didn't take that much notice to him because, as I tell you, he being a popular man and everyone coming to see him, they came and they spent the night there to mind him and everything. I didn't take any notice to the man as he passed in, or he didn't talk, nor I to him. But I was only within 10 yards of the door of the house anyway, so I followed in, and there was no man inside, and my father inside in the bed. I went into the room to him. My father was inside in the bed, and the man, there was no man there, so I didn't ask him anything because he wasn't in fit condition to go questioning him. Like, you'd have to be, well, you'd have to wait until he had himself alerted. But when I came out again, my mother was alive and hale and hearty at the time, and I said to her, who passed in? And she said, did you see him too? I said, I did, you after passing in there when I was tying the horse there. She said, Faith, and she said, you did, but you didn't know him. And I said, I didn't take that much notice. I thought he was my neighbour, Peter Haston. He used to visit him 10 times a day. They were great friends. So I thought it was Peter Haston that came in. And she said, you didn't know him? No, she said, but you weren't born. She said, when he died, she said, that was your grandfather. That was old Mick O'Dwyer. I said, you're joking me. In fact, she said, I'm not, but I'm telling you now something. She said, he's going to die now. So, at exactly 5:15, we looked at the time, the following evening, he said, I'm going. He died. So she saw him, and I saw him, in clear daylight, sure, 5 o'clock in the evening in the springtime. And I wasn't a bit worried about it. It didn't, well, we got messed for him and all that kind of thing, so the usual thing, but didn't make any.
Your father had all arrangements made.
Yeah.
He had all arrangements made for his funeral and.
He had. I suppose as well to do that too. Mm-hmm. he had to have. He was the old timer, of course. He had to have the 4 horses, hearse. They were easily got that time. They were in Limerick, of course, and as a matter of fact, they were in Ennis. You could get horse hearse out of there too, but Limerick, and he had orders given to give him the old time burial, a week, and half barrel of porter, of course. So when we touched up the local publican in the village, and he said, why not? I can have it, he said. He said, are you able to tap it? Oh God, I said I wouldn't chance that. I was able to tap it actually. He said, I'll tap it and not for you, he said. I was able to tap it because I had done barman in England for a number of years. In one of the leading houses in England, actually. And I knew all the British politicians. They used to come to the Finches of Holborn, the Strand, the publicans, and we used to give them the nip of euro. I knew Winston Churchill when he was First Lord of the Admiralty, and I knew Anthony Eden when he was Foreign Minister. He was a great statesman, Anthony Eden was. But old Churchill was dog rough. He was First Lord of the Admiralty that time, but he became Prime Minister after that. And I know how to tap a half barrel as good as what the publican did, and maybe better. But I didn't take it on. But of course the idea of he tapping it for me was, he brought the buddies from the market. And they tapped it all right. It was for to drink it. But like, I was delighted with that because, we were delighted with that because it was only going to go to waste anyway, like the finish up of it is. The locals weren't drinking mean. And the most anyone would take anyway was a glass of stout and go away with their business. But we held awake and kept him in the house for a day and a night, and consumed, only about a third of the half barrel. But after the funeral anyway, a couple of lads came back and they drank a few jars, and the neighbours wouldn't come within 5 miles of the house. They wouldn't give it a say anyway. There was no bit of principle involved as they'd come, because there was stout being still given out. But we got the Newmarket lads to drink as much as we could, but it was there a week or a fortnight, and any lad that we'd invite him up in the night that there was sup in the barrel, and some of them would come and some of them wouldn't bother their head. And the final finish of the half barrel was anyway that I had to go back. The publican wanted the half barrel, the wooden end of it, to go back. And here we were stuck with we had about a third of the barrel. So rather than spill it out, we had a flock of geese, big flock of geese. There would be 30 geese in it. And they were a cross between the big grey goose with the feathers hanging off her. Oh, they were lovely geese, sure. They used to be as fat as snails, man. And we got a present of an Indian gander. He was a German breed. He was a big gander. He was big as a swan. And mighty big animal he was, fowl he was. And we decided that we used to have troughs for water rather than and feed them. We used to always feed the geese chopped spuds and oats for the geese. And when Christmas had come, oh Lord, man, they'd be like ponies. You'd sell them hands down. Everyone would come for the fed goose. But they used to come from the airports and everything for the geese. But didn't we spill them in the porter into the tubs? So the geese went mad for it. Well, they got stone drunk. If you ever heard of a drunken, as drunk as a lord, but by heavens they did get drunk. And they used to cackle at each other, you see. They were all in a batch, and they used to fall, sit back in their backside, and balance themselves up again. Seem to try to study themselves up again. Well, the drinking came out their eyes. They were mad for it. And they were drunk for a week, and they were sleeping for another. It was the funniest thing I ever saw, I thought. Well, I often thought, that if you had the video camera, or if you had the camera, sure, there was no cameras and nothing in them times. We had nothing to record or anything. I was often saying that it was recorded, but you know what? It would be a terrible, laughable business to see the geese. To see the geese, and such a flock of geese,
Yeah, yeah.
But fair thought, we had a flock of turkeys as well. We used to keep a lot of fowl. But fair thought, I can tell you that the turkeys weren't that foolhardy.
No.
They didn't go for their nip. No. So I'd say now this. You see, there was no central heating, and you always had the hot water in the kettle because it was always laid by the fire.
Yeah.
nice bath, you see.
Yeah.
And you always had your bath of hot water. And anyone that has visited you, you always had a kettle on the boil
Yeah.
for to make. You
Yeah.
always had a kettle on the boil and
Yeah.
make down over say and. Isn't that nice now?
It is lovely, you know.
That's the stuff. I'm telling you now. And of course, you had. You had the metal frying pan, of course, for to fry the meat.
Oh, yeah.
I have a few items there that I'll show you sometime.
How do you figure out that's a number 4 kettle?
Well, it is numbered, look at.
Oh, there's a number on it.
There's number on all them covers.
Oh, that could be in the popular one, oh, the number 4 kettle.
Yeah, that would be the most general thing. This would be a bigger kettle again.
Yeah.
That would probably be now a number 6.
Yes.
I have the
Grand job.
no, stop.